Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here again, I guess, closing the year. To the ones that are watching online or that will watch later, we also say welcome. Today's topic, it's about Jesus, and we couldn't end, I guess December is always the year where people all around the world remember about Jesus. I would say a little more often, it's more in people's thoughts. And in Spiritism, we do have a brighter view about Jesus. We go into the deep understanding of his teachings, but not only his teachings, how he lived, how he did, how he taught, and how that message lives on today and will live forever. So the Jesus model and guide of humanity. I will open reading question 625. We could read the question and go home because, the question answers everything, meaning it's a short answer and, we could go home. But I'll open up with that and then we'll go into my thoughts. From the Spirit's book, 625. What is the perfect standard that God has offered to humankind as a guide and model? And the Spirit's answer were very short and concise. Look at Jesus. And then Kardec's note says, Jesus is the highest standard of moral perfection to which humankind on earth may aspire. God offers him as the most perfect model, and the doctrine he taught is the purest expression of God's law. He was animated by the divine spirit and was the purest being that has ever walked on the earth. There is another part of the Kardec's note, but I will just use that. So just moving from, that point of view that Jesus is the purest being that ever walked on earth, that is a big, standard. I had a hard time connecting to Jesus and God years ago. Let's say maybe 15, 17 years ago. Because I always saw God as a supreme being that was way too far from me. And Jesus in the same way. But since learning Spiritism, I was able to learn that in order to connect to God or to Jesus, all it takes is me hiring my thought and connecting to God. I don't need to be at a certain place to connect to God. I don't need to meet, at a certain time and day to be in contact with God. What we're doing today, it helps because, it brings us together, we elevate our thoughts, and we are able to together learn. But once I learned that, I was able to, okay, I can do this, baby steps, little by little. And today, I'm able to look at God more as of a loving Father, that no matter what I do, he will always be there for me. And so is Jesus. And then we look at Jesus, or I look at Jesus as like a big brother. The one person when you are in trouble that you can call or text, like Susanna was saying, you call and text. We can do that. But how can we do that to Jesus, I would say thought, through thoughts we connect, we make our prayers, and sometimes we can really feel the connection. At other times, we may be too agitated and we can't. But it doesn't mean that Jesus is not there or that he did not listen to our, prayer or thoughts. Now, going into what I brought, for you guys. I also always thought about Jesus, like looking back in time. Why was, or what did Jesus do that it was so different from his time when he was on earth that people had a really hard time understanding or accepting? And if we look back in history, we will see that the faith at those times were, polytheist. Is that how you say?
Polytheist.
Yes. So where you believed in more than one God, or you praised, images, and then, we have Abraham that comes, and then we have Moses. And then when Jesus comes, it's almost like, if we look at Abraham, like the birth of, the reasoning thoughts. And then we have Moses, where he has to implement laws. Many of those laws were, like men, like social laws, and then laws from God. But when Jesus arrives, it's like humanity is at a point that the rational thought is mature, and they're able to understand a little better the message. And that's when, throughout the time, we have messengers that came and, started building and paving the way. Let me see. I'm trying to find my notes in English. Where are they? Okay, all my notes in English disappeared.
Take your time.
Okay, maybe I'm on the wrong presentation, because I had two open and now I only find one. Okay, found it. So throughout the time, it was almost like that Jesus was sending his enlightened messengers to human groups. Since man conquered rationality, he has been providing him with the idea of the divine origin, the treasures of God's conceptions, the immortality of the spirit, revealing to you in each era what your understanding can grasp and comprehend. So at that moment in time, when Jesus was walking on earth, if we pay attention, in the Bible, when he is talking to, let's say, a woman from a house, he does not use the same words that he uses to talk to a priest, or that he uses to talk to a pastor, of sheep. That he uses the correct way. That's not like the way that they will understand. And if he talks to me or you in such a complicated way that we can't understand, what is the purpose on that? So I would say the first lesson that Jesus really taught us is know your public and use the correct ways that you can, touch their hearts so they can understand the message. So Jesus had the mission of to transmit God's thoughts to man. Only his doctrine in all purity can express his thought. Jesus' mission is to guide earthly humanity towards good, providing conditions for human beings to evolve in knowledge and morality. And this is the other point that it's really important. Knowledge and morality. We may have people that are, they're so intelligent, they have knowledge. But if they lack morality, at the end of the day, the choices that they make may not be so to the point where it's like what we would consider a right choice. So it's always important to understand that as human beings evolving, we will always need to work on those two areas, knowledge and morality. The coming of Christ shows that humanity was in a position to receive superior teachings. The coming of Christ shows that humanity was ready for, those superior teachings. The definitive era of spiritual majority of earthly humanity began since Jesus, in his divine exemplification, would deliver the code of fraternity and love to all hearts. We're gonna go, more like towards the end. We're gonna talk about love. But at that time, love was a new thing. When I say that time, I mean when Jesus was on earth. And I always like to think about the culture and the society from each time. Things that are acceptable today as far as human laws, maybe in 100 years it will not be accepted anymore. Just like when we look back in time, and we don't have to go way too far. If we look back 50 years, 100 years, or even 20 years, we can see how much, earthly life has improved. Although many people may say, no, we're going downhill. If we pay close attention, we will see how much good has happened and how many of these laws that were accepted, 50 years ago are not anymore. So think about Jesus just doing his daily routine, which was talking to the unfortunate, even talking to women at a time that we know for their law, it was not acceptable. I always like to mention the show The Chosen, and I was even talking to Jacob about it today. How in that show they were able to take simple tasks from Jesus' daily life and put into the picture in a way that we can understand why what he did was so out of the curve. Because Jesus was born at a time when the world was immersed in a mismatch of religious ideas, predominantly polytheistic, like I said before. So Christ came to bring the eternal foundations of truth and love to the world. His word, gentle, generous, brought together all the unfortunate and all the sinners. And then I was having a hard time with the word sinners, and then I asked and then I was like, okay, lost sheep or wrongdoers, people that were making choices that are not, if we think about God's law, that it was, the right choices. His teachings, preaching in the public square spoke to the disadvantaged. He peacefully combated all social violence, renewing the ancient law with the doctrine of enlightenment, tolerance, and forgiveness. And then, we bring forgiveness at a time where we were still going an eye for an eye, a hand for a hand, and, and so forth. He spread the clearest visions of immortal life, teaching earthly creatures that there are something greater than the human lands, flags, blood, and laws. His profound, energetic, and merciful word refounded all philosophies, clarified the path of science, and would have brought together all the religions of the earth. If the impiety of man did not make the weight of iniquity count in the scales of redemption. Sometimes I like to think, what if I was there? I don't know if I was there, let's be honest. But what if I was there and I saw Jesus, on a daily basis? What was I doing, 2,000 years ago? So I can't know what I was doing 2,000 years ago. I only know what I'm doing today. So today is the opportunity to restart. If we are at a point at our life that we don't know what to do, or the challenges in life are so big that we don't know which route to take, we can go back to Jesus and God, and from there we can start making choices. A lot of times what we want as an answer is not the answer we need at that moment. So I always like to say that all of our answers are answered. Some, it is what we want to hear, and most of the times, it is answered but not what we want to hear. And then think about it, if we're asking for something and it's not the time, meaning if we're not ready for it, it can be a little, disastrous. And Jesus had the ability of looking at each person and knowing what they needed. But the most important, he was a great leader. When you think about a leader, let's say at a religious group or even at a workplace, what defines a great leader is actually the ability of leading, meaning, you teach and you delegate, information. And Jesus had the ability to, I think I touched something here.
Switch the screen on.
Okay, thank you. And again, in the show The Chosen, there is a moment where after he gets all of his apostles and then he gathers everybody and he says, okay, now it's time for you to go and share the good news. And then they were looking at each other like, can we do it? Like they were doubting themselves. And then Jesus picked, like two people. They went in different groups. And there is one that when I was watching the show that it really made me kind of laugh because of the way the interaction happened. It was when Jesus picked Matthew and the other person, which now I can't remember the name, but they were completely opposites of way of thinking and because of their culture. And then Peter comes to Jesus and say, are you sure you're gonna do that? And he's like, yes, I'm sure. Because again, Jesus sees in you and in me that diamond that it's already polished. He doesn't see the outer part, the part where we are still carving and making sure that one day it will become that bright diamond. So when he saw the apostles and he was looking at each one of them, he knew the qualities. He knew what they would bring, that working together, what they could bring in sharing the good news. And for the ones who have not seen the show, I believe most of you have, it is really interesting. And then when we talk about the message, the Christian message has an impact because it's clear, free from initiatory formulas or manifestations of external worship. And again, Jesus did not come to destroy the law. That is the law of God. He came to fulfill it. That is to develop it, give it through meaning, and adapt to the level of advancement of man. So in all times, we will be able to spread the word of Jesus, using what is necessary for each person, for each group. I always mention my dad, because we have different faiths, but we believe in the same God. And it's been a long journey, meaning between him accepting my choice, that I'm not a child anymore and I can make my own choices, to the point where, he sees the value. And I remember last year when he was here, we were having a conversation, and he said, I think, that's his words, he said, I think at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter, what religion we are in. And then I was like, okay. I was like, continue. And then he said, because there are many people who do not have a religion, but they still do such good things. And then I said, Dad, when we look at Jesus, at the end of the day, that's what, we are expected to do. There are many people who say that they are atheists, but they're more Christian than Christians. So the other beauty that I like within Spiritism is the respect towards other faiths, other religions, and meaning that we can come together and sit down and talk about it and learn from each other. Because at the end of the day, every person has something to add. Every person has something to teach us. And when we're talking about Jesus, like I texted Teresa last night, and then she's like, well, if you're talking about Jesus, there is no reason to be anxious. Because I said I was a little anxious. Because that's the thing. We all have a common point, like where we can start a conversation from. And at difficult times, Jesus is the light. He's the way. There are moments when we don't know what to do. Then it's where, we should really remember about Jesus. Jesus was humble. That was another, one of his biggest qualities. He was humble, but he was also very assertive. I think in the United States, being assertive is much more accepted because you're not being personal. You're talking about something and that's it. There is no person touch about it. And some people may take an assertive person as sometimes even rude, just because they're going straight to the point. They're not going, talking to get to the point. And Jesus was very straight to the point. If he had to condemn an action, he would. When he had to praise someone, he would. So he knew exactly when and what to do at all situations. And then that takes us into the kingdom of heaven, because at the end of the day, aren't we all, waiting for the kingdom of heaven? In Spiritism, we also understand that the vision for kingdom of heaven may differ from other religious understanding, but at the end of the day, we're all working towards the same. It's to be a pure spirit, perfect. When we reach that point, we know there is not much rest, because we will be helping, humanity towards the greater evolution. That's what we hope for. By saying that the kingdom of heaven belongs to the simple, Jesus wanted to mean that no one is granted entry into that kingdom without simplicity of heart and humility of spirit. And then love sums up the entire doctrine of Jesus, since it is the feeling par excellence, and feelings are instincts elevated to the height of progress made. The law of love replaces personality with the fusion of beings and eliminates social misery. The next 2 slides I will come into, something that I think until today we do have a big difference, like as far as social differences. But when we look back in time, it was even more, that gap between people was much greater. So pure love is the reflection of the Creator in all creatures. It shines in everything, and in everything vibrates in the same vibration of wisdom and beauty. It is the foundation of life and justice of the entire law. Jesus teaches us that the first quality to be cultivated in the heart above all things is fidelity to God. And then we have, love for others. In the Gospel according to Spiritism, we have, a beautiful chapter that talks, especially not only, love your neighbor, but about loving your enemy. And then when we study that chapter, we fully understand when, they say love your enemy. It doesn't mean you're gonna have your enemy sitting, on your table eating dinner with you. But it's, if anyone has ever done any wrongdoing towards you, forgive and move on. Because not wishing anything bad to that person. Because many times and I've had that feeling, years ago. Yeah, many years ago. And it doesn't mean that it doesn't come to my mind every so often. It does. That's the tricky part, okay? Forgiveness, it's something that we do on a daily basis. So think about I'm going to ask you guys to think about, of course you don't have to mention, and I will think about, because I know what I'm thinking. So think about the one thing that maybe somebody did to you that, in order for you to forgive, it really took like a big part of you. Or maybe you can't even, forgive that person yet. I also would like to add that we also cause harm to other people. So let's not just see ourselves as, oh, we're the victim, always people are doing wrongdoing to us. But then, you work towards forgiveness because Jesus taught us about forgiving. And maybe you think about, oh, I forgave this action. And then you move on with your life, and then something happens, and then a thought comes back. I've had this happen to me last year. I was doing something, and then next thing I know, a thought crossed my mind. And that's the funny thing, Many thoughts cross our minds on a daily basis. The thing is, what are we nurturing? Are we grabbing that thought and nurturing, or are we just acknowledging and letting it go? So on that particular day, something happened, and it triggered me, and then this thought came to my mind. And then I was like, nope, I'm not going to go into that because I've worked on it. Thank you for sharing, and I moved on. Because I was so aware that in my heart, I had forgiven, that when the thought came, I was like, I'm not even going to dwell with it. Because in my heart, I feel like that I have forgiven. And then many times, it may happen. So when Jesus asks us to love our enemy, it really asks us not to wish any harm, not to say, that we are seeking vengeance, against other people. And then love for others is one of the basic principles of Christianity, ceaselessly exemplified by Jesus. In the sense, the Apostle John reminds us, quoting Jesus, respectively in his first epistle and his gospel, "Beloved, let us love one another." And then that takes us to the time where, before Christ, there was no signs of humanitarian institutions of any kind. Before Jesus, the orphan was taken into slavery. Women without titles were, objects of, scorn. The sick were thrown into filthy places. And the weak and the old were condemned to death without commiseration. And if we think about it, it's almost unthinkable. It's like, how could a society live like that? But then Jesus comes, and then the social landscape changes. The people begin to feel ashamed of sending the sick to those designated areas or to cut off hands of prisoners. Because remember, back then, if you were a thief, you would get your hand cut. So now everybody knows what you have done. Or selling mothers into slavery, or blinding the captives in routine domestic work, or mock the humble and the sad. So Jesus, without a palace or throne, without a crown or without titles, the genius of fraternity penetrated the world through the hands of Christ, and sublime and humble, continues among us in silence in the divine construction of the kingdom of the Lord. The path to the kingdom of God is not wide, broad, and easy. However, it is narrow and difficult. The instrument for its achievement is the love of God and neighbor as well as oneself. We already spoke about, the need for, forgiveness, but I'm just gonna read a small passage. Hatred and resentment denote a soul without elevation or greatness. Forgetting offenses is a characteristic of the elevated soul, which hovers above the blows that can be dealt with. One is always anxious, of dark susceptibility, and full of, I guess I cut my word, I can't read it. The other is calm and all meekness and charity. So it's just saying, the soul that is able to forgive, there are some characteristics to that soul, and the one that can't forgive. But I always like to add that even if we're not able to completely forgive, it doesn't mean that we are a bad person, because sometimes we read something that stick to us, like, oh, so does that mean if I can't do this, I'm not a soul that is elevated? Or I always like to think about the book from Dr. Alberto Almeida, that he talks about, the path to forgiveness. I don't remember the name in English of the book, but there is a chart that he uses in that book, and the chart says, think about, something you want to forgive. And then you rate, how difficult is that? And then he says, maybe something that it's easy for you to forgive, for another person, it is almost impossible, because we're all in different levels of understanding and evolution. But it's always important that we can, look up to Jesus and ask for that, as to be strong, so we can actually, fulfill what we think would be the best at that moment. And then we could also add about prayer, because, that's how we actually connect to God and Jesus. Prayer is the divine movement of the mirror of the soul towards the superior sphere to reflect its greatness. Praying is identifying yourself with the greatest source of power in the entire universe, absorbing its reserves and portraying the laws of permanent renewal that govern the foundation of life. And then we're, leading towards the end. And I would like to end saying that Jesus' teachings represent, therefore, the cornerstone, that is, the consolidation stone of the new building of faith, erected on the ruins of the old. And then moving forward, there will always be new things or new ideas arriving to our understanding. And it is pretty normal that many times, because we don't know, we are a little, skeptical. But then when we look at a person, Jesus, that he walked on this earth, and he was able to do all that he did without a single tool, meaning, he did not have Wi-Fi, he did not have a cell phone. Can you imagine, Jesus today, like, okay, let's do a WhatsApp, group chat, and then he sends all the information that we all need. He didn't have all that resource, and still his word is alive today. So the invitation this morning is that we can be Jesus helpers, spreading the good news and living a life of abundance and being on the right path. So we can all, achieve the kingdom of God, since we know that it's a narrow path and it's not that easy, but together everything makes it easier. And that's what I had for you guys today, and I hope that whoever is listening to this at home, that you can be inspired, and you that are here be inspired to seek Jesus on a daily basis. Thank you.